I also want to tell you that there's been no time like this. And even in a bad dream, we couldn't anticipate this. As I sit there a moment ago, I've been informed that when I came in here, I knew when I came in here, the price of oil was $5 a barrel, WTI. It has just gone to $1. Ladies and gentlemen, $1 barrel oil did not exist in my adult life. And this is not a Nancy story. This is real. And we are gathered here today to address what has been put upon us. And I am pleased to hear that Professor pointed out that the government's proportion of the GDP, the economy, is approximately 37%. I think it is, we worked out somewhere. And in this room today, the government is represented by, I think, 20% of the population of this room. So the government has not flexed its muscle numerically in seeking to address this problem. What we've done is to join the rest of the country in putting our shoulder to a wheel that is threatening to crush us. I want, on behalf of all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, to sincerely thank each and every one of you for answering this call to national service in this moment of great uncertainty and, I dare say, trepidation. While it is true that we would have liked to have all the views of all the citizens here, like the Roman Forum, it is not logistically feasible. But the consultative process, where you are free to co-opt as you deem necessary, will permit as much input as the circumstances require. The world is facing an unprecedented human crisis that is unleashing dramatic economic and societal disruptions. In this crisis, no country has been spared the ill effects. Since the reported outbreak in Wuhan, China in December 2019, December 30th, 2019, the novel coronavirus has become a rampant and destructive force, affecting approximately 2.3 million people and already causing over 158,000 deaths across 185 countries. The world that we have become accustomed to and life as we know it has changed and will quite possibly never return to what we knew in our lifetime. The way people live, the way we work, trade, recreate, and learn, and the way businesses and societies function have all experienced an upheaval of the norm in a relatively short space of time. The disruption which we are experiencing also brings with it the opportunity to create new and more resilient economies and societies that potentially have a better chance at achieving sustainable growth and development, something that we have been after for a very long time. According to the World Bank and its semi-annual report on Latin America and the Caribbean region, Trinidad and Tobago was more prepared for the crisis than a lot of its Caribbean counterparts when assessed against global benchmarks in 4 areas: fiscal, monetary, financial, and external preparedness. Even so, Trinidad and Tobago must now plan for its peak COVID-19 future within the confines of the new normal, at least until such time that a vaccine is developed and tested, which could take, some say, 12 to 18 months. The new normal will feature, among other things, the continued need for physical distancing and stringent public health requirements, and will set new protocols for how we conduct our lives, operate our businesses, and deliver services to customers in both the public and private sectors. The new normal will, in part, be dictated by global and regional developments and scientific progress, but it must also be prescribed by the country's chief medical officer and other public health experts. An important step in developing this recovery roadmap must be to clearly identify and analyze the constraints that will continue to exist for some time. What are the constraints that will underpin an economic recovery effort, as a high level of uncertainty persists about the virus and which we should be doing next? The roadmap must delineate objectives and targets to be achieved and actions to be taken over the immediate, short term, and the medium to long term. These objectives and targets must be established in the context of a defined vision of the new economy and the new society in the post-COVID-19 period. The roadmap must also define the elements of an effective enabling environment necessary in the immediate short term and the medium to long term. A critical requirement of planning for the recovery period is the development of a framework to guide the reopening of the economy in order to reboot economic and social activities. We can't do that vaiki-vai. A readiness assessment guided by the CMO and other health experts will be necessary to inform the opening of non-essential business and institutions, but we will try to open at the earliest opportunity, balancing and assessing the risk involved as we do so. In the immediate short term, the emphasis must be on recovery by first and foremost keeping the country afloat, pursuing quick wins by jumpstarting economic activity in key sectors and stemming any further widening of income disparity through employment preservation and income and social support to the most vulnerable groups. There's a continuing need to prioritize currently limited resources to protect economically vulnerable groups and support those sectors related to people's livelihood. Furthermore, there must be sufficient food and daily necessities available for the population at large. Alleviating the negative impacts of livelihoods on the economy must be given as much attention as stopping the virus, so as to prevent severe damage to economic and social systems over the medium term. At the same time, the population must be encouraged to think what they must do differently once the stay-at-home order is relaxed, given the health and behavioral protocols which most likely to be continued to prevent further transmission. The period of recovery must be driven by actions of government, the private sector, civil society, even at the individual and personal level. The government must become a more agile partner, removing unnecessary bureaucracy and enhancing its execution capacity to directly stimulate and enable development. What do we need to remove or minimize government bureaucracy, enhance efficiencies in the execution of policies and projects, and deliver better services? Government must continue to support social systems, provide the stimulus for economic rebooting, and facilitate the recovery efforts of the private sector. Hopefully, a private sector that would be willing to answer the call made by Professor Theodore. It would be important to analyze the impact of government spending in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and to re-examine the efficacy of the current development program in meeting the objectives for the recovery period. The work must be done against the baseline report prepared by Professor Theodore, in which he anticipates the size and nature of government's support and stimulus. The adequacy of the intervention, together with where and how this money is to be sourced and spent, are critical questions which you might have to answer. In terms of the private sector, the emphasis must be on removing constraints into private investment and initiatives that are integrated to the achievement of the objectives of the roadmap. The impact of the pandemic on specific sectors and mechanisms to facilitate the resurgence of economic activity in the energy, manufacturing, agriculture, services, banking and insurance, retail and distribution, and construction and development will all need to be explored. Conceptually, civil society can provide an effective conduit for the implementation of many government-funded social programs. Non-government organizations can enhance the government's execution capability and support the objective of keeping the country afloat in the recovery period. The readiness and health of this sector to be deployed must be evaluated. In view of the lessons learned from COVID-19, the deficiencies and structural rigidities in the economy must be examined as the basis for remodeling and creating a new economy. At this juncture, we also have the opportunity to explore new sectors, new industries that hitherto had not been explored, but which we may want to venture into at this time. How do we build resilience to deal with future threats? How relevant is the National Development Strategy in the Vision 2030 document? How relevant is that now with the advent of this COVID-19 disruption? How should Vision 2030 be tweaked? What are the enhancements necessary to make Vision 2030 more actionable now? As a small island economy facing external vulnerabilities, can we continue having such high dependence on imports, particularly imported food? What are the new industries that we should be promoting? What is the role of technology in the new economy and the new society, particularly in dispensing public service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? How should we remodel our processes for prioritizing and executing development projects? In the light of the prevailing oil shocks and the industry's uncertain future, where, how, and with what should we diversify our economy? It is said that culture eats strategy for lunch in the same way any economic roadmap developed without the creation of an enabling environment to facilitate the execution of that roadmap will have its many challenges. As such, the roadmap must place considerable focus on the requirements for establishing an effective enabling environment that supports the achievement of the established objectives and targets. The role of labor and tripartite cooperation must be fully explored. What are the fundamental elements of this enabling environment that are critical success factors for the recovery and the medium to long-term transformation? Furthermore, are we comfortable with the value systems that exist in the country? What are our core values, and are they consistent with the new economy and the new society that we want to create? What type of behaviors do we want to promote? How do we create a more progressive value system that will advance our short-term and our long-term objectives? What institutions do we need to put in place to strengthen and support our objectives? What are the legislative requirements? How do we create the environment for public-private partnerships and utilize that mechanism in the development of this country in a hurry? How do we more confidently move from commission agents living off attractive markups to producers of our own products for our consumption and export? What policies and structures do we need to put in place now to deal with future epidemics, pandemics, and economic market shocks? COVID-19 has unmasked the inequalities that exist in the economy and at the wider societal level. But it also has demonstrated that all segments of our society are at risk. The roadmap must, therefore, be based on collective action and strong collaboration among all sectors of the economy and all sectors of the society. The roadmap will require a programming exercise to be undertaken to ensure that execution is feasible and takes place within the context of resource availability and execution capability. It is not sufficient or desired to hear eloquent presentations on how bad the problem is without solutions. It is because we know how seriously affected or threatened we are why we are here today. Not to try and get us back to what we had or where we were in December 2019, but to chart a new course, maybe from December 2020. The current state of the economy and the projections for the near and medium term will provide the benchmarks for monitoring and evaluating implementation progress. But at this juncture, I want to take the liberty of putting an asterisk by the temptation to a permanent welfare state leading to bankruptcy and persistent poverty. That is easy to do, coming out of the template of Trinidad and Tobago. That is the easy way out. That is not what this committee is about. There are cautions to be observed in this not so easy task. Throwing borrowed billions of dollars into unproductive subsidies, increased social welfare, increased pensions and massive grants in an unsustainable approach, which will further wreck the economy and damage any chance we have of ever balancing the national budget in the foreseeable future, is not the task. This will destroy the progress we have made in expenditure restraint, domestic production, and income generation over the recent past. In particular, any suggestion that we should increase existing welfare, which already costs us almost $4 billion a year, and that we increase contributory pensions when the NIS is already in deficit and heading for insolvency, seriously limit the use of these options if the goal is not only survival, but sustainability as well. Will such experiment guarantee the stimulation of the economy, or will it just perpetuate and entrench a huge, unfunded, unproductive liability and lead us to the valley of unsustainable debt, create hyperinflation, and send our credit rating to permanent junk bond status? I give you that as the other side of the coin to what Professor advanced as one of the considerations of fixing the problem. This problem has many sides and many options. You are required to help us find the option of choice. In the view of some others, that while such a policy approach may yield dividends in advanced economies with a broad-based, diversified production structure, it is likely to have different or even disastrous results if adopted in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. I don't know. You think it through. Our experience has shown time and again that efforts to spur growth through massive increases in government spending could result in wasted resources. Professor spoke about waste. It also resulted in domestic inflationary pressures. Remember the time when we were talking about overheating the economy. And of course, Professor mentioned unwanted expansion in imports without significant domestic output. These are the pitfalls on that road, the map of which you're going to draw. The solution to post-COVID-19 must lie in rebuilding our productive sector, creating employment, boosting productivity in manufacturing, trade, and the services sector, improving revenue collection, and reducing unsustainable expenditure. The solution cannot be an unsustainable welfare state. These are the challenges that have brought us here today, and these are the challenges we have to tackle and untangle so that among these options, so that our choices can be determined and recommended for the road ahead. It is to be expected that we may, or I can even go further and say that we will, not all agree on everything. But we would be much better off together if we examine all our possibilities, our potential and pitfalls, and in the end, be guided by a strong sense of patriotism and faith in our ability to find the best options, whatever they might be. And let me say finally, as I take my seat, that let us give the country the comfort in knowing that those of you who are gathered here and the many persons and agencies that you will consult with, you will be doing so not as a lobbyist of your private interests or your personal expectation, but you will be doing so as a representative of the only hope of all the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because by now we are sure that wherever you've come from, wherever you've been, you would agree that at this time, in this situation, we are all in this together. It's either we swim together or we sink together. This is Trinidad and Tobago. If it burns down, we all will live in the ashes.